Hi class, Professor Underwood here. I just wanted to jump on and talk a little bit about this week's topic, suicide. Last week, or actually a couple weeks ago, I was talking with a student, just kind of getting to know him a little bit better as we were waiting for stuff to start, and just asked him about his family. And he was telling me that he had a brother and a sister, and he continued to tell me a little bit about his sister and that she had just had a baby, and he was excited to be a new uncle and things like that, and that he was just here going to school by himself, living by himself, like with some roommates for the first time away from his family. And so just kind of talking to him about his life. And I just said, oh, okay, cool. So how far away does your sister live? And he's telling me a little about, keeps talking to me about his sister. I said, okay. And you mentioned you had your brother. Where does your brother live? And he just said, oh, well, he lives in heaven. I said, okay. Um, I was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Or, okay, do you mind if I ask what happened? And then he said, well, he committed suicide. And it was like all the air in the room just got sucked out, and it was just like silence. It was just all of a sudden like an awkward pause, and I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How did you feel about that? Or how did your family take that? Or how old was he? And just continued to ask him questions about that and allowed him to talk about his brother who had committed suicide and help him process and talk about that and know that it was a safe place to talk about that. Um, you may look at this chapter on suicide and wonder, why is suicide in a deviance textbook? Why are we talking about that? It's not like getting a face tattoo or breaking the law or all these other things that you might have really thought deviance was before you took this class, right? But now, as a student of sociology of deviance, you know that deviance is anything that strays from the norm. And it's not normal to want to kill yourself. It's not normal to have those thoughts, or at least it's not normal to act on it, right? And so we'll be talking about that a lot more. Remember, as sociologists, we don't define right, wrong, good, or bad. We're not labeling that behavior. Instead, we're setting social constructs. So why did it feel like, oh, the air went out of the room when he said his brother committed suicide? Why? The fact that we had that reaction, the fact that it was an instant, like just all eyes were on me. And nobody was making eye contact with him or engaging, and nobody was continuing their side conversations. They were all looking at me like, I can't believe you're talking to him about this, right? So what does their reactions tell me? What does that sanctioning behavior or that heightened awareness tell me? That's a deviant topic, right, to talk to my student about. And the question is why, right? So for the next few weeks, we'll be discussing different kinds of deviance, and probably that you didn't consider deviant before you took the class. So suicide is one of them, mental illness, obesity, disability, all of these different things. And again, keep that definition in your mind, that it strays from the norm. We're not saying something is right or wrong. We're not saying something is better than something else. We're saying it's different. So keep that definition in mind as we go throughout the next couple weeks. It strays from the norm. Okay, so also keep in mind your breaching experiment that you guys did a couple weeks ago. Many of you, all of you, you didn't break any laws. You didn't commit a crime, but instead you broke a norm. How were you treated because of that breach? How did other people sanction you or try to reinforce the norm when you broke the norm? I want you to really think about what you learned during that experiment as we talk about this these different types of deviance for the next couple of weeks. So let's talk about suicide a little bit more. Why did it feel like all the air was sucked out of the room? Why did I feel all those eyes on me? Because talking about suicide is not the norm. Having a professor say, "Oh, how's your family? Oh, let's start talking about your brother who committed suicide," right? Is not the norm. Does it mean that it was wrong? No. Does it mean that other kids will devalue this student? No, it really shouldn't. What it does mean is that there's a stigma attached to suicide. What it does mean is that we're not comfortable, right, when that breach happened. We aren't comfortable when the professor went to another level of questioning rather than just being like, "How was your weekend?" "Oh, good, fine, great, great. Okay, let's talk about this week," right? That this is an emotionally charged subject, right? It's because of the stigma that's attached, and also the heartache and the worry that surrounds suicide. Your text opens up the chapter with some different myths, suicide myths, and I really want you to read those and get familiar with those. Not only are they academically sound information, but it's also crucial in helping people around you to identify who may need help and to know of different ways to talk about suicide, and so that we can help people around us, or know that it's okay to reach out for help if we are having those deviant thoughts, right? So my senior year of undergrad, I co-chaired a suicide prevention hotline with actually one of my best friends. And I learned quite a bit on this job. It was a 24-hour line where callers in the community could call in and talk about whatever they wanted to talk about, their feelings, their concerns, their plans. And so I got some very valuable information and resources and knowledge and experience working for the crisis intervention hotline and suicide prevention hotline. I wanted to share two of my top takeaways as you read this week that it might help you. So one, talking about it does not encourage it. And that's one of the biggest myths and one of the big concerns that people have. Like, oh, especially like parents, right? I think my kid's getting really depressed. They're withdrawing. I don't know. I'm worried they're going to commit suicide, but I don't want to talk to them about that and suggest that idea. Trust me, if your kiddo or someone you know is going to commit suicide or is thinking about suicide, you're not planting that idea in their head. It's something they've already thought about. And so going to the next step of saying, do you have a plan? And that was always in our training. Because you want to see where they're at on the level of contemplation versus plan versus attempt, reconciliation, where they're at in the steps of potentially committing suicide. And then that also helps us to know what kind of intervention or steps or help we can get them. If someone already has a plan, then they are pretty committed. They know, especially if they have a time. If they just have a method, you always want to ask if they have a time. And so that way you can intervene, call for help, and get some resources to that person. If they're just like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't feel like I can go on. I don't think there's any point. I don't think anybody even cares. I don't think anybody will miss me, or they'll all be happier once I'm gone. I'd be less of a burden. Those type of statements, those are invitations to talk. Those are invitations to discuss what they're thinking and feeling, right? We need to take the fear and the stigma out of suicide, out of talking about it. Just like everything else, the more we say, ooh, we label it as odd, different, deviant, wrong, less than, right? As soon as we stigmatize something, people don't feel comfortable talking about it. And so we need to make that comfort level there. We need to just ask questions, just like you would about anything else, and help them to the best of your ability and get resources. I have posted resources through the school and through the county and through the federal government on my announcement page for you to have other resources and helping with people who may be contemplating suicide. Okay, the other thing I really gained an understanding of is that those callers who called in usually lacked a support system. They usually were feeling unplugged from the people around them. And as you study, you know that we have a sociologist by the name of Emile Durkheim who termed this anomie. And this is a time, and this is when he talked about people who experience anomie are most likely to are people who commit suicide are most likely going through periods of anomie. So time periods where they don't have a routine, where they feel unsupported or unvalidated. They, to use COVID words, they don't have their bubble, right? Their little circle of people, and this is my safe place. They just don't feel plugged into that. They don't have that. This time of normlessness is a higher time or a higher rate of suicides. And there's different times in one's life that this happens. Right now, many of you are experiencing this. If you've started college or moved away or moving out, this is a time of kind of like reset of, okay, I'm going to a new school. I'm starting college. It's a new phase of my life. I'm starting a new job, right? All of these new things that sometimes when everything's new at once can feel overwhelming. And when you don't feel like you're succeeding, or you don't feel like you're connecting, or you don't feel like it's meeting the expectations that you had going into it, that normlessness, that anomie, that unsettled starts to come in. And for some, it spirals downward real quickly, right? And can go to that dark place. Remember, that would be a stigmatized word attached to deviance, attached to suicide. So sometimes in your life when anomie occurs can be any major life changes. Okay, so new college student, a new job. Another big one is a loss of job. The stress that happens then. The demands on your time and financial resources. Newly divorced. For new prison inmates, the highest probability for those inmates to commit suicide is when they're when in that adjustment period, when they're just incarcerated. Also, when you get a new health diagnosis, especially if it's a terminal diagnosis, we see that the rates of attempted suicide and suicide go up at those times. So knowing these things can help us, right? I'm a big fan of G.I. Joe, and knowing is half the battle, right? When we have this information is power, information is key. We can watch for signs, we can read the information, you can look through your chapters, and you can be aware. Don't be afraid to talk to people. This student after class said, hey, thanks for talking to me about my brother. Nobody ever wants to talk about it. And most of the time, my family is so hurt, they act like it didn't happen. And he goes, and I just appreciate it. In that conversation with him, I ended it with asking him, well, what's one of your favorite memories of your brother? What do you miss most? And it ended on a positive, loving note, right? And when we do that with people and we connect with people and we see who they are and we invite them to engage in human interaction, we can't discount the effect that has. So go out there, arm yourself with good information, read the chapter, And I will continue this conversation with you on the discussion boards. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.